Thank you very much, President Officer. First, I want to thank MSPs from across the Chamber for supporting the motion to allow it to be debated today. And before getting into the substantive points of the motion, I want to give some background as to how my office became so heavily involved in this particular matter. And as we know, McClure Solicitors were founded in Greenock in 1853, went into administration in 2021. Glasgow-based firm Jones and White then took on roughly 100,000 matters McClure's had on their books. Some people had multiple matters. This meant that anyone needing to gain access to their documents would need to contact Jones and White. They can choose to stay with Jones and White, or they can choose to go to any solicitor of their choice. Now, when McClure's ceased trading, there wasn't really a vast amount of press coverage to read, particularly how this would impact former clients. And this did occur during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I believe that 84 jobs were secured when Jones and White took over the goodwill, work in progress and certain assets of McClure's, including all wills, power of attorneys and trusts. So, while being aware that McClure's was no more, it was not something that gained much by way of news coverage or generated a lot of emails into my inbox. This changed as of last summer. I started to see a growing number of people contacting the office, likely spurred on by the growing knowledge of the firm going out of business, and more national news coverage, specifically from Katie Hunter at BBC Scotland, and also more and more people with trusts receiving letters from Jones and White. I understand from discussions with Jones and White that, whilst there may quite rightly be an expectation that former McClure's clients should have been notified by now, but they simply aren't able to do this en masse, and they're making their way through the files as quickly as they can, focusing on trusts in the first instance. They were clear, however, that anyone who has business with McClure's should contact them, and they will do all they can to help. And once again, for clarity, there is no requirement for former McClure's clients to use Jones and White services going forward. If they do wish for their documents to be reviewed, they can instruct Jones and White to do so, or they can ask for their documents to be returned to them for another lawyer of their choice. Also, as I learned more about the issue, I arranged meetings with interested parties, including the Law Society of Scotland, the Scottish Legal Complaints Commission, and also the Minister. And I've spoken to several solicitors and many constituents. I'd like to put on record my thanks to the SLCC and their Chief Executive, Neil Stevenson, for engaging with my office as I attempted to assist affected constituents. Neil attended 2 public meetings I held in my Greenock and Inverclyde constituency to explain to former McClure clients what the SLCC can and cannot do regarding any support or redress. And the first event I hosted sold out, and due to the level of contact I was receiving from constituents, it became clear that another one was required. So across 2 meetings, over 270 constituents gained a seat to put questions directly to the SLCC and myself. And after the last meeting, I've had requests to do a 3rd meeting with lawyers present to answer legal questions. I am working through the legal ramifications and also the risks of doing this. Now, while both meetings were for former McClure's clients, they were not specifically to discuss McClure Solicitors, but to provide information about the main route they have for recourse if they believe they have a complaint to make about either McClure, its staff or any other lawyer. Also, I know some of my constituents have already had complaints upheld by the SLCC and compensation awarded, which is why I've been so keen to raise awareness of this issue. It's also why I was keen to secure a members' debate, as I'm aware that it's not only my constituents who are affected by this. I've no doubt there will be former McClure's clients who will only be finding out about the firm closing down whilst watching either this debate or from any subsequent press that happens from it. Also, it's clear something went very wrong at McClure Solicitors, and that's why we are here today. Thousands of people across the UK spent significant sums of money with McClure, with the expectation being that they would not have to pay for any legal work like this again. For many, this will not be the reality. Thousands of people are now having to spend additional sums of money having McClure partners removed from their trusts. And whilst I understand this may involve a cost to the trustee who is being removed, I would ask them all if, morally, they should be taking a fee. I also understand that there is nothing wrong at all with solicitors being named on trusts as trustees. However, I believe it's more commonplace for a law firm itself to be named on the trust as opposed to individual lawyers. Now, if that were the case with McClure, and again I believe they did start to do this in later years, more people may be in a different situation today. Now, I want to turn now to what can be done going forward. A suggestion by a constituent at the second public meeting was for the Scottish Government to create an organisation to review people's documentation to help them determine what action, if any, to take next. Now, most people are not legally trained and have already spent many hundreds, if not thousands of pounds on documentation that may or may not be fit for purpose. Now, I think this is a welcome idea, but I don't know where the solicitors would come from to staff such a body, as trust lawyers are specialised and most would already be in employment, and those in training may not possess the relevant expertise, and some who are retired may not want to get involved. But if the Scottish Government could give it some consideration, I know it certainly would be appreciated. Now, secondly, I believe an inquiry should be held in the future, and also some MSPs have echoed this call. And I want to be clear, however, that I don't think an inquiry at this point would be beneficial, because the current focus must be on helping people. The fact that not every trust will have been reviewed indicates to me that any inquiry in the short term would be premature. It would also deviate time from solicitors who are dealing with many of the McClure's cases that otherwise would be spent on helping people now. And that said, we do need an inquiry to be held in the future to drill down what happened at McClure's leading up to the administration. Not a fishing expedition that looks at everything and anything, but a focused inquiry. I've had constituents making many claims about their documentation, and including, and I've just got a very short list here, powers of attorney were not lodged with the Office of Public Guardian despite the work being paid for, trusts were in the wrong name or other details were wrong, or they weren't properly advised as to what a trust is, why they might want one, and what the implications for them were going forward. And some have even suggested trusts may have been set up for relatives who lack capacity, and trusts have not been registered appropriately with HMRC and the Land Register of Scotland. The reviewing of the documents is therefore vital in terms of substantiating or not these claims ahead of any inquiry. I accept we can't pass legislation retrospectively to fix past issues, but we can, however, learn from it. And the Government has already introduced bills before the Parliament, including the Trust Succession Scotland Bill, which was passed in December, the Regulation of Legal Services Scotland Bill, which passed Stage 1 last week, and the Judicial Factors Scotland Bill, which the Delegated Person Law Reform Committee will be scrutinising from late April. Now, these bills are important as they will strengthen the regulatory regime that law firms operate within. However, as I indicated last week in the legal regulation debate, I believe that an inquiry into what happened at McClure's will ultimately lead to more lessons being learned and potentially further reform. In concluding, Presiding Officer, during my 17 years as an MSP, no other single issue has dominated my caseload and my inbox like this particular issue. Thousands of my constituents are affected, and also many more UK-wide. And I will certainly continue to do whatever I can for my constituents, and I would encourage anyone who has been affected to contact their MSP or MP if they live elsewhere in the UK. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McMillan.